Hello everyone, Daniel from DePIN Hub over here. This episode is brought to you by IoTex, the DePIN modular infrastructure for everyone. Hello everyone, Daniel from DePIN Hub over here, and today I have Karam, the co-founder of Dabba, a project that's been revolutionizing internet infrastructure in India and hopefully across the world. We actually met, when was it, 2022, right, in Austin during the Helium House, the first Helium House during Consensus 2 years ago. So it's a lot of time, 2 years, a lot of things has happened. You know, the DP name came out. There was no DPIN at the time. Everybody was talking about proof of physical work, DY and other things. But yeah, finally have you on the podcast. It's really nice to have you here talking about what you guys are building. So yeah, let's start by you introducing yourself and your role at Dabba.
Sure. Yeah. First off, thanks for having me on the podcast. Long time listener, first time guest. So I'm really excited to be here. And it's been amazing to watch Hotspot grow and the stuff that you've been doing over the last 2 years. It's been genuinely cool. I think, thank you for spreading so much to the community. I know I've learned a lot from the stuff that you guys have put out over the last 2 years or so. So so I'm Karam, one of the co-founders of Dabba. There are two co-founders. Shubs and I started Dabba in 2017. We've been an ISP, an internet service provider in India for the last 7 years. We've got a strong background in operations, and we've built one of the largest public Wi-Fi networks in the country. We powered parts of Google Wi-Fi. We helped write the telecom policy for India over the last couple of years as well when it comes to Wi-Fi. So we're deep entrenched connectivity providers, and now we're ready to accelerate things with, take things forward.
Yeah, no, and also, I mean, India is one of the biggest countries in the world in terms of area, but also mainly population, right? Like infrastructure is always a big question when it comes to that scale. I remember like the first time I went to India, not that many people had broadband in their houses, but everyone had very fast internet in their phones. And I remember, I think it was at the time was 2017 or something like that. And then we had 1 GB per day of data to use. It was like, oh, that's a lot more than almost anywhere else in the world, right? So I'm sure that India is a different environment to work in terms of infrastructure, and you guys have been doing this for quite some time. Can you tell us about how did then, from all your backgrounds, how did it, translated that into founding Dabba, the vision behind it, and what you guys trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, so our goal is to sort of bring high-speed, cheap, super fast access to everybody that needs it. The demand for data, as you mentioned, has exploded over the last 5 years. Demand for data consumption has pretty much doubled year on year over the last couple of years. India is a unique snowflake in the world where we've got 800 million 4G subscribers. We're the highest amount of data consumers in the world. We have the lowest prices of data in the world. But now the challenge is the mobile networks cannot keep up with the amount of data that Indian consumers want. And because, as you mentioned, we're a developing country and our cities have exploded in size, everything's sort of grown, but infrastructure hasn't caught up. So although we've got, hundreds of millions of people with 4G access, barely anyone, less than 5 or 6% of the country has access to Wi-Fi, whether at home or office. So now everyone's hitting limits of data consumption on their phones. Networks can't provide more on their phones. So there's this mad rush to build out broadband connectivity in India. And again, just to hammer home that point of scale, like the US has about 100 million or so broadband connections, like about 80% coverage, something like that. China is about 70-80% with about 600 million connections. India has only 30 million broadband connections, right? So over the next decade, there are going to be at least another 200-300 million broadband connections that are rolled out in the country, and we want to help power and accelerate that revolution.
That's amazing. And that with that came the idea with Dabba, right? Can you touch about that as well?
Sure. So Dabba started in two ways. So Shubhendu and I, the co-founder of Dabba, we've been working together for about 15 years. So we used to run a software logistics company before we started Dabba, and this was a very specialized thing. So the kind of software that we built was used by logistics companies that only delivered cash, gold, high value items, right? So it's exactly like you see in the movies, armored trucks, guys with guns, that sort of thing. And we learned how to build really good software and secure services over there because there's no such thing as a lost package. Now, two things happened around that time. One was we had to build hardware that tracked all of the trucks and transport of material and that sort of thing. And we found that, great, you'd have a truck with a couple of $1 million worth of gold going around the city, but cellular service is not good enough, no LoRaWAN available, so giant connectivity gap when it came to things like this. The second thing that sort of really hit home to us was, again, because we worked in a fairly secure environment, pretty much our entire company was on call, for anyone in the field that needed our help. So we would have our daily stand-up meetings of the office at a tea stall near where we worked. And everyone would have their laptops there. And then, you don't have good connectivity. So one day we were like, hey, we should install a broadband connection at this tea shop. We did, and it was an instantaneous hit. Like all customers wanted it. And then we were like, hey, okay, so this is useful. And people seem to want it. And more importantly, people seem to be willing to pay for it. We've never had a free customer on the network. Pretty soon, all the other tea stalls and stores down the road from that place would be like, I need a connection in my store. So we expanded really quickly, to a couple of, almost 1,000 connections. We built like the largest public Wi-Fi service at the time. And then we got funded by Y Combinator. We did some amazing partnerships with Google. So it was just this, clear feeling of pain of connectivity. And then we did something about it and we started growing like crazy. That's where Dabba came from.
Really, really solving a problem, right? I think immediately. And it's really cool that, from the chai shop or the tea shop around it, and then that goes from there. How was the process to get to Y Combinator? Like, what was the idea? Like, what led you to apply for Y Combinator to begin with as well?
Interestingly, great question. There were two things that made us apply to YC. First was we knew that if you wanted to do something like this, you'd have to raise money, but there'd be very few investors who would be interested in a project like this. Because if you look at the global telco world, it's dominated by Goliaths that have monopolies and that sort of thing, right? So you need an investor who understands what revolution and change looks like. And we really, at the beginning, identified for at that early seed stage, YC would be the best fit for us. We applied on the last day of YC, 1 hour before the application deadline, and it worked out. We got in. So that's, we knew sort of instinctively that was the investor that we wanted. We applied to them and we got it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sure you guys managed to learn a lot from them, right? Like get everything and support from the founders and then everyone that's around the IC Combinator. I'm sure that can help a lot. Yeah, I remember like when we first spoke in Austin in 2020, you guys were thinking about doing is install these nodes around the buildings, and they're going to be connected by lasers. I think you guys changed a little bit about that, but I think it'd be cool to tell maybe how does that started and then how it's going now, how did it evolve?
Yeah, no, so laser is very much on track. We're going to launch it next year, so we'll get into details of that in a bit. But great question in terms of context. Okay, so let's look at sort of the world of people who need connectivity divided into three types of people. Sort of three segments here in India where demand is the highest and paying customers exist. Like one of the points I definitely want to make is we're a very demand-driven project, right? We're not building out supply and hoping that somebody's going to use our network someday. We have more demand and more customers that want data than connections can be given to them, right? We need to be able to build out our network faster and faster. So three types of customers really need connectivity. So the first type is super small micro retailers, like, people that have hole in the wall shops, like chaiwalas like this, or juice shops, or super small retail that are the backbone, 70%, I think, and thereabouts. So a crazy number of Indian commerce retail activity happens in these stores. We're not a country with big boxes and that sort of thing, right? It's a million, must be 10 million micro retailers that power the economy. They need connectivity because everybody in India does digital payments now. You scan a QR code and you pay. Nobody does cash. Now, let's say you've got a dense, 200 micro retailers shoved into a tiny public market. Cell phone connectivity has a very bad time there. So customers want connectivity there, store owners want connectivity there, everybody wants connectivity there. So that's one segment that we cater to. The second segment is a lot like co-working, where, there's managed office buildings and that sort of thing. In India, a fairly big segment that's coming up is called co-living, where it's managed housing. You're a single person, you moved from a small town to a city like Bangalore for a software job. You want to live in almost like a managed hotel rather than share an apartment with a couple of friends, that sort of thing. There are tens of thousands of people living in places like this, and all of these are young, educated up-and-comers. And to give you a sense of scale, India has 700 million people under the age of 30, right? So there's millions of people living in residential places like this that want high-speed connectivity. The last and final segment is things like offices and that sort of thing. So one thing that we found when we scaled our network dramatically and rolled out 1,000 locations for micro retailers, we were using partner ISPs at the time. So we would go to whatever that area was, say who are the different ISPs, and sort of set up a bidding system where they could bid for our locations. We found that our ability to expand was faster than their ability to deliver connections for us. So when we dug down into the root cause of, hey, I'm selling a store, a location, a house, or whatever, and you can't get me connectivity, we found that it comes back to that core infrastructure issue that you touched upon earlier. When cities are expanding, they lay a grid of fiber optic cable under the streets, and that's where sort of end connections happen. But when you have a city like Bangalore or most cities in India where population and size of city has grown by 10x in 20 years, infrastructure doesn't keep up, right? There are 100,000 people moving to the city every day. So it's hard for any ISP to have basic connectivity to give it out to customers. So the reason it's damn expensive is because when you try to dig up, a mile of road, that's $100,000, that's permissions from local governments, that's a nightmare. So it's very hard for systems to keep up. So when we took a look at solutions, we found that 5G was an okay solution, but 5G is limited to its sort of core throughput speed. You can't build a network out of that. And at that time, we found Google was doing this really interesting project where they had balloons around the world as cell phone towers. That failed badly because, for a million reasons. But the interesting technology, and the interesting technology that they had on it, though, was the balloons themselves communicated via lasers, and those links were amazing. So we said, hey, we can do a poor man's version of Starlink, right? Where instead of throwing satellites in the sky, I can build this optical grid, and build a core connection and thereby dramatically lower the cost and time it takes to deliver an internet connection. So what we learned in that process was the system was great. We rolled out a bunch of lasers, technology is amazing, all of that. But large companies are large, slow companies for a reason. Like Google is not the Google that we all remember from 20 years ago, right? It's a Fortune 1 company that is slow, bureaucratic, and all of that sort of thing. So we realized that we could build our own lasers, do it more efficiently, do it cheaper, do it faster. And we've been putting in that engineering effort, and those lasers will launch next year. But to tie that all together, not only do you have end customers that want a ridiculous amount of data, but you need to revolutionize the way that you deliver that last mile connectivity itself. So in one part, we're aggregating all of the all of the tens of thousands of micro ISPs across the country to deliver connectivity, but we're going to provide them the backbone technology, the software stack, and the DeFi support in order to scale networks dramatically.
Yeah, you guys are also building a lot of the hardware, right? Like to power everything. I think I remember checking your website like I don't know, a year ago. There's like 3D rendering for the hardware, like super cool. Let me see if I understand correct. So the idea is that you're gonna have broadband or like fiber optics to one building, and then you have a cable, like it could be Ethernet cable, whatever, that goes up to the top of the building, and that building is gonna be some sort of like a hub or core. They're gonna shoot laser all over the place for other buildings across the road or something like that. And then the other side is going to have a receptor and then like a cable that goes down the building, and you're going to have like, this way you can feed the entire building, and then you can scale much faster because lasers are fast as light, basically, right?
And it's going to be cheap enough. We're going to have hundreds of these, and it's going to be fast enough. See, we're building up to this idea of what we call an ISP in a box, right? So let's say you're so there are 100,000 what are called local cable operators in India, right? India is a unique location where, although we have a couple of monopoly telecom providers, there are also 100,000 small businesses that provide cable TV services for the last 20 years, right? So it's a guy in a small town somewhere with a dish antenna, and he's got a couple of hundred subscribers. Maybe he runs a small electronics shop along with it and a small real estate business, whatever it is, right? But enterprising person. All of these people are shifting to become micro ISPs. So what we want to be able to do is ship them literally a shipping container on a truck that contains a bunch of lasers, a bunch of cables, a bunch of hotspots, and the software to connect tens of thousands of customers in a matter of a couple of weeks. We think we're going to be able to genuinely bring down the cost of connecting 100,000 people from a couple of years to a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I have so many questions. I love this topic. It's super cool. How hard is to reuse the current infrastructure in terms of not necessarily the cables, but probably the pipes you're passing the cable from the ceiling,
non-existent.
Right?
You got to build it out. Like, it doesn't exist. You can't reuse it.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of work in that.
We're like layer 0, like layer -1 almost.
Exactly. No, I can imagine there's a lot of work, but it's nice that you can get those people to do the work as well. It's not only you, actually. Like when I started with deploying helium hotspots, was me and Max, climbing roofs and pulling cables ourselves. How reliable are the lasers as well? Because I can imagine, does the rain or like fog, the smoke, and like pollution interfere?
Great question. So we had almost a dozen lasers running for 2 years in all conditions, right? And properly Indian conditions. So, and Bangalore gets all kinds of weathers, right? You get thunderstorms, you get heavy rain, you get fog, you get mist, you get windy conditions, you get a couple of ridiculously hot days in the year, you get monkeys, you get trees falling, you get building. So like we would install at the top of buildings, right? So you would get tenants of the building who'd come and be like, oh, what's that cool piece of hardware? And like shake it and that sort of thing, right? So we have gone through every condition and beat greater than 99% uptime. Because the crazy thing to remember is like a laser is so small and the beam is so tiny. And even something like heavy rain is not much of an issue because the beam pretty much cuts through between the raindrops, because at that scale, raindrops are massive. So, the laser has no issue with that. And with decent signal correction and the price point of the lasers, we're going to be able to put one every kilometer or two apart. So let it snow and we'll be fine. Nothing to worry about. All good.
IoTech's modular infrastructure empowers DePIN development across every vertical, creating a vibrant ecosystem of projects and real-world applications. By enabling projects to deploy in full or integrate our DePIN-optimized modules into existing frameworks, IoTech furthers its mission to democratize DePIN for everyone. IoTech is celebrating their recent $50 million investment with the first ever DePIN airdrop, featuring 5 training projects, all pre-TG, that are #BuildingIoTechs. Complete Galaxy tasks to climb the leaderboard to secure your airdrop. At heart, IoTech's elite goat on Discord even get whitelisted access to highly valued DePIN project public sales. Check it out. Interested in building on IoTech? Connect with the team at bd@iotech.io. I don't know if you watched the movie The Hunger Games, but I'm sure if you watch the movie, you know that they're going to be hiring you guys to put the infrastructure inside of the domes because they have everything happening there as well, right?
Yeah, I'll check it out. Never seen it, but sounds cool.
You understand what I'm saying then when you watch it. Let's touch a little bit about the DePIN angle. I think that's something that's quite interesting as well, right? Because like it's not going to be people that are going to be buying the device themselves and installing their own homes. How does that work for you guys with Dabba?
There are 2 things that we bring to the sort of DePIN table that I think will unlock a lot of value for existing DePIN users and new people that we can expand sort of value offerings to. So one thing is, let's say that you participated in some DePIN project. You bought like a weather sensor or some sort of radio device and whatever, and you were happy with it. Now, you suddenly have to become a deployer if you want to do a whole bunch of them, right? Whereas for us, it's an instant click experience. Come to Dabba, buy a hotspot, choose the local cable operator that you want to support. That person will go and install it, maintain your hotspot and everything. You can build out a fleet of your own with practically far lower amount of effort than otherwise. The second thing that we think that we're bringing to sort of helping evolve DePIN is against this sense of demand. where you're deploying things that are going to be used in a place where you will get network effects and you will get a great amount of value, rather than a sort of, hey, this is this cool thing, let's see how it works out, sort of YOLO, it's all going to work, we're all going to make it at the end, sort of thing. So I think when it comes to DePIN, that's what we think we bring into the table.
So you guys are pretty much expanding the capex for the project in a way that people can, I can, instead of me myself buying a device and installing, I can fund a device or buy a, for me it's kind of virtual device, although it's going to be installed physically in someone's location. But then I'm going to be the owner or a co-owner of that location, and I'm going to take a share of the profits, and the profits going to be in terms of like tokens. How does that going to play out on that? And which chain are you guys building on top?
Yeah, so I want to expand that. One of the interesting things is, so not only, yes, will you buy a virtual device, but we also open up the kinds of devices that you can buy over time, right? Because from our deployment perspective, we have the demand, the customers, the location, and everything. So if our team is going to take the effort to go and install a hotspot somewhere, there's no reason we can't contribute, for example, to mapping or GPS or weather or things along those lines. So there's a roadmap over there. The second thing that we want to bring to the table is, so we're going to be having our token generation event towards the end of July on Solana. And one of the interesting things that we have sort of tweaked to the way DePIN systems work is, you as the person buying the hotspot, as the hotspot owner, get all of the rewards. Then you use those rewards to further reward the local cable operator that installs and maintains the hotspot for you. So there's utility to the token that is directly involved with the managing and installation of the network itself. So we're taking a very top-down approach where this leads to a more competitive situations, because cable provider A can be like, hey, I would like 10% of your daily rewards. Cable provider can be like, I'll take 7%, so you can build a competitive situation, because like I said, we're going to be onboarding tens of thousands of local cable operators. So it's a marketplace where the goal is to deliver things more efficiently as possible. The second thing is, this also ensures quality of service, because if that local cable provider does a bad job of maintaining your thing, you're going to stop paying that person rewards the following, after the grace period. And the second is, on our Explorer, which, anyone that's watching, if they're interested, on Dabba.network, you should check it out. You're also going to start seeing, so you can see basic stats right now, like network uptime, how many customers an LCO has, how much data is being consumed, how many devices are, like everything. It's totally transparent. But we're going to have more interesting things like customer reviews, customer complaints, things along those lines. We've also built an entire suite of tools for our partners where, for example, each hotspot clocks into the central server, giving it status of whether it's up or down. If it goes down, even before the customer realizes it's down, someone will be dispatched to fix it. And the way that you see on DoorDash, hey, your food is arriving in 6 minutes, you're going to see a Dabba technician's arriving in 6 minutes, and they're going to solve whatever the issue is. So the way that we're thinking about the tokenomics and the rewards is, all rewards go to hotspot owners. Hotspot owners redistribute those to the various stakeholders in the ecosystem to make sure that it's an efficient and good process. And all of this is there in detail on our Gitbook, which again is at gitbook.dabba.network. Or if you just go to dabba.com, I think the links are on top.
Yeah, I'll also make sure to put all the links on the description of the podcast. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you guys have in the past 2 years? Like, it seems like you have an antenna that's been running for, or like a laser that's been running for 2 years. I think there's a lot of challenges you had to overcome over the past like 2 years or 3 or even 7, right? Because you guys have been aligned since 2017, basically. What is one that you remember as like quite challenging that you guys are very happy about successfully overcoming it today?
The thing that we find the most promising sign that things are headed in a good direction is sort of the reason of how we entered into the crypto and sort of Web3 landscape and DePIN. So like, at the beginning I mentioned that we knew that there were very few investors that would be interested in the telecom space because it's so competitive. And that too in the most competitive market in the world, right? So you're at the bleeding edge of competitiveness. So the appetite for a lot of investors is not there for a various variety of reasons. So in about 2018, 2019, for a solid 3-4 years before that, we would continuously get, somebody in the team would get an email or a call, or somebody would walk into the office going, I love what you guys are doing. When are you coming to my area? Do you have a franchise system or anything like that, right? And when we kept hitting the wall with investors going, hey, we're not going to fund you because this telco will kill you or Google will kill you, the government, like whatever it was, right? We were like, I think we've gone through at least 400 rejections at this point. But anyway, we were like, okay, people seem to be saying good things about us. Is the public willing to put their money where their mouth is? And we sort of divided the city up into a bunch of regions and said, hey, you can pay to own this region in sort of a franchisee model. And when we started talking to people and setting that process up, everybody, 1 out of 5 conversations would be people telling us about, hey, have you guys heard of this thing called helium? They're kind of doing what you're doing and it's amazing and that sort of thing. And that's when we realized, whoa, okay, there's the entire world of crypto, there's the entire world of DePIN. And, this is genuinely a new way in which large infrastructure is going to be built out. So I think one of the challenges that we had, which is this is not a technology problem, this is not a marketing problem, this is not any other problem. In a lot of ways, it's just about directing capital to the right areas and setting the right sort of incentives. So the big light bulb moment that went off and the biggest challenge that we solved was understanding that there are people around the world who are interested in being part of amazing infrastructure projects and genuinely bringing value and that sort of thing. And the best way to harness them is through the principles of DePIN in crypto. So
Yeah, and kudos also for the perseverance, right? Like sticking up to the idea and hustling and trying to make it work up to the point that you have this like vision and this moment like, okay, actually this DePIN method or whatever that also came from like Helium actually bootstrap a lot of these incentives. And it made a lot of sense. I think you guys are in a great position right now. I'm very, very excited to see that flourish as well.
yeah, thanks. I think one of the reasons we stayed alive, and I think, again, just to hammer that point home of things that we're bringing to the table, is we've been a profitable company, right? It's helped. It hasn't been this case of raise or die, right? This is a great market to be in with great growth. So I think that definitely helped. If you're a founder watching this, if you can get to a point where the company makes money, life becomes a lot simpler when it comes to survival.
Yeah, I know, absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I think that goes a lot with us, right? Even though we don't make like huge amounts of money, it's still like we survive, and then each market, each cycle, it changes a lot on how things are going. But yeah, same thing. Like we're currently fundraising for DePIN Hub, but there's a lot of good traction of a lot of things that we're doing. So that's not just like we need the money, we need the raise to pay the salary. So that's a pretty good thing that makes me definitely sleep better at night. I can imagine if you don't, it's much more stressful, right?
Yeah, and it allows you to take like a nice long-term view of things. You can build real value.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's something that we're trying to do as well on DePIN Hub. Like similar to what we did with Helium in the beginning with Hotspot, it's like figure out how can we help the whole DePIN ecosystem thrive, and as a whole, and not just like try to extract as much as value as possible, then move on to the next thing. Because we've been out in the space for 4 years, not as long as you guys, but we've been really focused on trying to help everyone and then actually make money along the way, because that's important for a healthy business, right? How do you foresee, like, okay, in a month you guys are gonna go like a TGE? How do you see the next like 6 months to 5 years from now?
For us, it's extraordinarily clear, right? We have one singular North Star. Deploy as many hotspots as possible. There is room to deploy hundreds of millions of them. And our goal is to accelerate that process and expand that as much as possible. That's it. One number. How many hotspots do we have? That's it.
So yeah, that's basically the KPIs that you guys are running. Like if we are growing, we need to be scaling that number. Where does the bandwidth comes from? How does that work to get access to that?
It's really interesting. So just to take a really sort of quick zoom back, right? Fundamentally, the internet is nothing but a series of undersea cables. And when those undersea cables hit land, they are under highway and under railway tracks fundamentally. In India, those two sets, that sort of constitutes the national backbone, the telecom backbone. That's owned mostly by the government and some bits by the large telcos. So these lines come to the edge of the city. And then right now in India, it's entirely overhead optical fiber cable. So if you come to India at any point, just look up and you will see internet cables on trees, on poles, on anything. Going as of now, this is what the infrastructure is. This is what we're leveraging and this is what we're using. But as mentioned, we hope to dramatically remove most of these cables and distribute it within the city via laser.
Yeah, I can make a parallel there with Brazil, because I'm from the south of Brazil, and I'm living in Portugal for many, many years. You don't see a lot of cables. Everything is underground, which means like deploying infrastructure is extremely slow, right? And then by the time I moved to Portugal and by the time I went to visit, like let's say 3 years ago, in the beginning there was nobody had fiber optics or fast internet. It was like, okay, it's like cable internets, right? And then when I came back, everybody had fiber in like 2 years later because they were actually passing out the fiber optics through the poles, like the light. So it was very, very fast and cheap to deploy the infrastructure. The only downsides, of course, if there's like, a truck hits a pole and then the whole neighborhood gets without internet, which is not a very nice thing to happen. So yeah, there's like this balance there. And I think what you guys are doing is very interesting, right? Like it's much more, I think, stable. You don't rely 100% on the cables to have internet on those buildings. As long as that main building that's providing the core part of the node, it's up, everything else is good, right?
Multiple advantages come with that. So it's really easy to build a redundant system because the units are going to be so cheap. And most importantly, because it's not a radio wave, it's in the area of free space optics, which is light. There are no licensing fees for it. So you don't need to pay the government billions of dollars for spectrum to be able to transmit data.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't think about that. That is very true. And can you like also, do you relay that information between building to building?
Yeah, you just sort of stack them, right? One points this way, the other one points the other way, and passes the beam inward.
Then it can go technically to the infinitum, right? So I like that.
What is no lag, because light.
Yeah, exactly. What is the range of that you can have comfortably to nodes?
So in testing, we've been able to do 10 kilometers and 10 Gbps. And that's the floor. Like there's an amazing roadmap on this. But for what we're going to target for dense urban areas is just about 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, and 10 gigabytes up and down.
I mean, I think that's pretty good. I think that's you guys can have like a shelf life for a long time with that until people start complaining that 10 gigabytes is not fast enough, right? Which is going to happen, but it's going to take some time still. Where can people know more about Dabba and the project? Is there anything that you like to tell the people? What's happening, and the last closing remarks that you'd like to throw out there?
Yeah, for sure. I think the best place to learn about us is to go to dabba.com or dabba.network to check out our Explorer. The TG happens fairly soon. We've launched season 2. It's a sale of 10,000 hotspots. Hotspots are available. Please consider taking a look at them. They're selling out pretty quick. And yeah, we think that we have value to bring to the DePIN world, and we'd love for you to be a part of it.
Yes. Oh, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was super fun to do it, and we should definitely do it again. Maybe after TG, maybe in like a few months from now, and see how those things are progressing. And yeah, I want to see your hardware. And one question that I forgot to ask is, are you guys also planning to get out of India?
Our approach is super straightforward. It's inspired by that Jay-Z song, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So because India is the most competitive environment, we're going to refine our process here for the next couple of months and then expand to other developing nations and BRICS countries, right? So Brazil, Africa, Indonesia, that sort of thing. Yes, globally soon, but
focus on
fix it at home
India
first.
Exactly. Amazing, man. Thanks so much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you here. And yeah, like looking forward to see what you guys are going to build next, because you guys are kicking ass for sure. Have a great one.
Awesome.
Thank you.